Hi, everyone. This is Raquel.
Hi, and this is Jennifer.
Welcome to Madness Cafe.
This is a feminist podcast where we talk about women's issues, politics, and health and wellness.
And where those issues intersect. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Madness Cafe. Our guest today is Anika Pavel, and she was born Yarmila Koshvarova in Czechoslovakia. What was intended as a one-year stay in England turned her into a refugee when the Soviet Union invaded her homeland, writing a bloody end to the Prague Spring. She received a crash course in life that took her from sleeping in a telephone booth at the Victoria Railway Station in London to waitressing, to the lights of the fashion runway, and onto the magazine covers, even a James Bond appearance under the more pronounceable moniker, Anika Pavel. When the lights had dimmed, she returned to her first love, writing, which brings us to her lovely book here, which we'll get into in just a second. Her work has been published in print, online, and nominated for a Pushcart Prize. And we are going to talk about Anika's book, Encounter with the Future. We're so excited to talk to you about your book. Thank you so much for being here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. I was going to start a little bit different, but I just want you to tell us a little bit about being on the BBC this morning.
Well, it was very exciting. As you can imagine, I have a lot of history with London. Obviously, that's where I first came, and that's where I worked as a model. And so when the book came out, there was a number of people. I had a big spread on Monday in Daily Express, and so I had several BBCs has been interested because I first came to Ipswich, so I also did an interview for the Ipswich BBC. But today was my first live interview for the BBC London, and
congratulations!
So yes, and it was fun. And Robert is quite a personality in England, and he loves London, and so we had quite a chat about the old days. So it was fun.
Would you tell us a little bit about your childhood and how you came to be a writer?
Well, as a child, I actually always was not really a loner, but I always say I like to be alone amongst a lot of people because I like to have the buzz of people, but it allows me to pretend to be somewhere else. Out of the lots of people, I always created situations. And that's how I think I started to imagine things. And I was writing in my head from a very, very young age. I could turn any situation into a story in my head. And I didn't really start actually put it on a paper, except the school. In school, whenever we had subjects, so I would always excel at writing. I think when I was 14, I started to write my first book in a longhand. I don't even remember what it was about, but I still have it in Slovak and in my drawer. But someday I will go and look at it and see how good or bad it is.
I would love to see that.
Yeah, same.
But in school, I also had published some essays when I was in high school. My teacher always said, you should be a writer, but my mother saw me more as a journalist. And so I always had a desire to travel, and my mother was always believed in traveling and learning and seeing about other people so that when you know something, you can understand it better. That was always a philosophy. So when the opportunity came for me to travel to England, of course, my mother helped me, immediately she grabbed it and she helped me to get out. And I was very lucky. But, I was a swimmer. And as I said, I'm youngest of the three. I had two brothers. As a child, you are happy because your parents protect you. Mm-hmm. But then when you get to be teenager and you start to hear Radio Vienna and you hear Elvis and you hear Beatles and and you see magazines that people smuggle into the country, and you suddenly realize there's a whole different world out there. So then you start being antsy and you realize, you live in a forced environment that is wrong.
You use the words My mother helped me to get out. For our listeners who don't know, get out of what or where?
Get out of Czechoslovakia to England. That's what I was referring to.
Right.
Yes.
And when you were growing up, Czechoslovakia was a communist country. And that's one of the things that I find really interesting is the juxtaposition from living in a communist country to then living in England and then coming to the States, and the sort of the notions that you had about things, and then to see, oh wait, this is totally different.
Yes, it's true. But I really didn't have that much. I guess I was so young. I have just barely turned 18. And when I came to England, I don't think I had a preconceived notion what England was going to be like. The only thing I knew that I could travel. And to me, that was the ultimate, because as I said, my mother always gave us books about different countries. And so I just wanted to be able to travel. That's what it, and to learn about other people. I was like a sponge, and I was just soaking it all in and learning about everything. And I loved it. And so how I got out was, we couldn't travel, and that was for a teenagers and for somebody especially like me who always had books about traveling in other countries. It became very suffocating. And we couldn't even go to Hungary, to the other communist countries. When Alexander Dubček became the head of the Czechoslovak government, he believed in socialism with a human face, and he people to travel, and he also gave us a freedom of speech. And it took a while for people to really caught on, but because my mother was like into it, so I must have been one of the very first people to get out. Nobody believed I was going to get out. They were all laughing at me, but I did get a visa, and I got a 3 months visa, and I went to England, and people were like, wow. After that, it became all, it got quickly to be known, and so a lot of people started to travel. But of course, then the Soviet Union didn't like it, and then they landed with their tanks in Prague, and that was the end of Prague Spring, an end of Czechoslovakian freedom. And then for a long time, I didn't see my parents. It was very difficult, but I was talking to my nephew today, and he was like saying, boy, things you went through. And I said, it's interesting when you are going through it. The way you survive is not to dwell on it. You just put your right foot forward and left foot forward, and you go.
It is interesting, your story, in light of you went to travel, but really you became an immigrant. How does that play out for you in regards to what we're going through in the United States right now with the immigration policies?
Well, to start with, when Soviet Union invaded Czechoslovakia, Britain gave every Czechoslovak citizen in England automatically a visa to stay indefinitely and a work permit, which I think it was extremely smart, because rather than those people struggle, and some who might be a little bit more adventurous, for lack of the better word, or for not wanting to use a different word, they might steal. If you are hungry, you steal. You go to a shop, and if you get the opportunity, but you didn't have to do that because I was able to work. And I think it's a smart thing to do.
Right.
I
I mean,
agree.
obviously that was many years ago, and it's, each situation is slightly different.
So complicated, really so complicatedly different.
Very complicated. It's very complicated.
Tagging on to what Jennifer just asked, and I know we're kind of jumping into the deep end really quick here, but how does your experience as an immigrant and just that experience in general, how does that color the way that you see what is going on here with Trump wanting to deport everybody, and people trying to become citizens here. Like, I mean, what do we need to understand about the immigrant experience that maybe we're just not getting as a society?
I think that my situation was very different. I was young and I had a desire to travel, but
Mhm,
to be honest with you, I had no intention of emigrating. I wanted to come
mhm.
back, but because of the invasion, I became an immigrant.
Right.
But I think that people should know that people just don't wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to immigrate today.
Mhm,
You don't do that. It takes, when you have a family, I mean, I was 18-year-old brat who wanted to see the world. It's very different. But
mhm.
when you come with a family and children, you don't do that lightly.
No.
Right.
And you only do it if you truly, truly have to.
Mhm,
It's fine if somebody, obviously, I'm not law and order, but if somebody commits crimes, then just like, you treat them just like Americans. You
mhm.
commit crime just like Americans. You do this, you have the same consequences.
Right.
There's action and consequence to everything.
Mhm.
But I think that the people who are running away from either famine or they're doing it for a reason.
Yeah.
Right.
And I
Right.
mean, to me, the to cutting out foreign aid, it's the most anti anti-immigrant thing that anyone can do because
Mhm.
if you want the people to stay put, you help them to stay
Yep.
Yeah.
put instead of making it harder, and then you
Mhm.
are shocked that they want to come. I
Yeah.
mean, to me, it's oxymoron.
To
Absolutely.
me too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I agree wholeheartedly. I noticed to put things on a lighter note because there's so many lovely themes in your book going throughout the stories. One of them being the importance of family and the importance of kindness, maybe not being able to repay that particular person who does a kindness to you, but paying that forward. And there's so many instances of that, of those two themes in your book. I would love it if you would talk a little bit about how family and kindness and helping others sort of wove through the stories in your book, basically from the way that your family raised you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, basically, it starts when I was 3 years old, when I got lost.
Mhm,
My mother could never thank to the man who brought me home safely. But she always used to say, you you help others, and it's what goes around comes around. My mother was a queen of cliches, but just like her, I believe the cliches stayed around for so long because there's truth in it.
Mm-hmm.
mhm,
And the same thing would happen to my father when he was helped. He was never able to thank those people. Me too, I couldn't thank the people who helped my father.
mhm,
But I always feel whenever I can, I help people. I always say to them, don't worry about it. What goes around comes around. One day you'll have somebody else that I won't know about. And that was really, it's has guided me all my life. And I have taught that to my children, that it doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be the same person. It just gets into the earth, it gets into universe, and one way or another, it comes back.
It sure does. It sure does.
I love
In
that.
in your essay, Freedom, you land in the home of Mrs. Landis
Right.
and you learn that she is secretly helping out the young ladies in the neighborhood. I should just say she's performing abortions. You were very young at the time, 18. How did that impact you, and how does that impact how you regard these things moving forward?
Well, yeah, I was 18, and I have to say I was 18 going on 13. I was very, very young, and so
Mm-hmm.
it was quite shocking for me.
Mhm.
But as I write about it, little by little, life, when the Soviets invaded Czechoslovakia, I have learned what is it to be alone. And if you have no help, what do? You are responsible. You have to do something. And so ultimately, I agreed what she did. She was a wonderful person and helped these girls that had a good reason to do what they did. We all make mistakes. None of us are geniuses. And I believe that, to me, it was that none of them came twice. That was important. And I always believe that as long as you learn on your mistakes, you are going forward. It's when somebody repeats the same mistake, that's when people get into trouble.
And you not knowing even really what was going on, you were comforting these girls in their time of sorrow. And Mrs. Landis herself ended up in jail.
That's right, she did.
In jail for her beliefs. What a hero.
Yes, she did. She did. Absolutely. She was willing to help because she lived in Rhodesia, well, Zimbabwe now. She used to talk to me a lot about it, and I could see that she was really affected by the suffering of women and how women were treated. And I think that affected her. And she said she helped. Ultimately, she told me, I don't write about everything in a book, that's when she first did abortions to the women who couldn't even feed the children they had. So she felt that if she can help even one woman to suffer, it's worth it.
Agreed.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Did you want to read from one of your essays for us today?
What essays would you like me to read?
Oh, there's so many good ones.
All of them. Okay, I actually, hold on, because I have a couple that I starred as some of my favorites. Hold on. Where are they?
I'm surprised to like the book so much.
It's such a
How
a
could you
beautiful
not
book.
like it?
Yeah, exactly.
It's full of hope and love and things that, even though they happened in your youth, they're still very relevant today. In fact, right now, they're extremely relevant.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I tell you, my favorite story is Jackie, Nina, and Me.
Yes.
Read that one.
Will you read some of that or the whole thing?
Some of it, probably.
It's a long story. I think that's a long one, so I don't know how much you want me to read from that. But it's also the first story I have written.
Really?
Oh, I didn't realize that. Yeah. That's awesome.
Well, and it was the last story that got published, which is very, very funny. I mean, because it got published before this book. As you know, 10 of them have been published prior to this. So I don't know how you can stop
maybe like where would you like to start in the book, or do you want us to pick something for you to
why
read?
don't you pick? That would be great.
Okay. I really like, I think it starts on page 339, where you really talk about how people really misjudged both Jackie and Nina, and basically how women in general are judged for very superficial reasons, and it's always, or mostly it's wrong.
Right. So by the time I exchange Big Ben, shall I start there?
Yeah.
By the time I exchanged Big Ben for the Statue of Liberty and returned to my first love, writing, a place outwardly anonymous, yet in which I would bear my soul, I wondered, who was behind the face in a magazine? That thought would bring me once again to Jackie Kennedy and Nina Petrovna. Because of the marked difference in their physical appearances, the photographs seen all over the world failed to reveal the closeness of their inner lives and similarity of their inner strengths. The irony of people underestimating Jackie because of her beauty and Nina because of her lack of it made me realize that the way others perceived me did not change who I was. And I was able to see who was behind the photographs in those magazines. There I found my mother, who had an audacity to believe that an 18-year-old girl could successfully navigate a world she knew only from books. I found a determined young girl who grew up in a hurry, yet who remained a dreamer destined to write. I found a poem penned long ago by a teenager that always provided me with hope in the darkness. Today my hair appears to match Jackie's perfectly, but under the coloring, it is as much salt and pepper as Nina Petrovna in that old photograph pinned above the wooden radio. Now I have a large television on which I see the events unfolding in Ukraine. Images of destruction and cruelty bombard as lifeless ash replaces the once beautiful cities. I tremble at the memory of Khrushchev's words following the Cuban Missile Crisis. Nina Petrovna was from Ukraine. She materializes in my mind, and I think of Jackie, who worried about the little man moved by fear and pride and feel trapped in the darkness. But then I look closer and I see a grit and the grace, the dignity of those women long gone. I look up on a TV screen and I see a little boy traveling from Ukraine in the length of Slovakia to meet up with his brother, who is a student in Bratislava, with no more than his brother's cell number written on his wrist. I focus on his story from my homeland, and I see the little boy's bravery, and I see beauty in action of kindness he encounters on his journey. As the boy is interviewed, a little piece of blue skies is visible behind him, and I'm transported back to my family room and a poem that once again inspires hope in me.
So beautiful.
I love that so much. I literally underlined all of that. Like it's all
thank you. By the way, I don't know if I should have repeated it, but the Khrushchev words, you all know what they were.
Mhm.
That in nuclear war, the survivors will envy the dead.
Yeah.
Very frightening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
in this story, you reach back to your childhood home and you talk about family. And like I mentioned earlier, that's a running through line in this book. And I just have to say, from reading your stories, I feel like I got to meet your family because you describe them so well and so lovingly. It's just such a beautiful thing that you're basically keeping them alive through the telling of the stories about them.
Thank you.
I would love to know what that does for you, being able to share your stories and your family stories with people who have never met them.
It is obviously it's very important.
Mhm.
But I will tell you, my children are very grateful, and because I have 8 grandchildren and a 9th on the way. So
Congratulations.
Congrats.
they are very thrilled that their children will know the grandmother, great-grandmother, and great-great-grandmother. And I have photographs everywhere, and you've seen them in a book. I think it is important that everyone tries and keep a note of their family, because we all can wonder who we are, and it's nice to have some point of reference. It's so much fun in a family. Now kids are quoting me, so if I start saying something, they finish the sentence for me.
Oh, that's funny.
And if my stories can help somebody, that would be the ultimate reward. And if it puts smile on somebody's face. I had an interview that somebody said to me that story about the toilet paper, during the court and stuff. And she said to me, I was so done. And when I wrote that story because I was preparing for the interview, and I laughed out loud, and it just lifted me up. So that kind of a stories makes me feel very, very happy that I can put smile on somebody's face. Or if I can make somebody think, maybe I can see that person differently.
Mm.
Important.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And also it's to learn, I think that when we learn about each other, we understand each other better.
Mm-hmm.
Hence, travel is a university of life.
Exactly.
From your
Exactly.
mother. When
Right.
I was reading the book, I kept thinking, my daughter is 18 right now. She just went to college. She's in her second semester. And I kept thinking, oh, I hope that I am a mother like this to my child. I just felt really inspired by your mother and the sweater that she
Oh my
said
God, I love
to
that.
take with you
Yes,
so
I
that you
love
could
that.
always feel comfort of your
Right.
mother and of your
Yeah.
home. There's just those touches of love I feel can help children, especially when they're not home, to touch back to where they
Right.
know that they are loved.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, something like that can be so important. They can really give you strength, because strength can be very, you can feel it's so much of a mind. It's so much in your
Right.
mind, your strengths, It's a mind over matter.
I
Mm-hmm.
wondered when I was reading the book, you talked briefly about you had nowhere to go. You were coming for a new job. You ended up in a telephone booth overnight sleeping. And I remember the description of you sleeping for a little bit, waking to see, sleeping for a little bit, not having a very good night's sleep, but you survived. You survived in a phone booth. How did that feel to you? Were you terrified or were you just gonna do it?
Yeah, I was so, my mother was so pivotal because, I had her sweater, and she always believed in future. She was the ultimate optimist. And she just installed in me that there was so much I was going to achieve. This was just a teensy weensy hiccup. Teensy weensy hiccup. So, and it was just, I never thought that I was going to end up being homeless. I just thought this was
Mm-hmm.
one night and I have to get through it.
Mm-hmm.
And then once I get through it, I would be fine. And I felt in the morning as if I had a good night's sleep. I was refreshed.
That is amazing. That is amazing strength.
Right. The bravery of an 18-year-old, my goodness. You were just like, I'm gonna do it. This is just it's just a bump in the road.
That's
In
right.
in another of your stories called In a Song for Katrina, you speak about a perpetrator, someone who was,
Yeah.
even though your family was incredibly kind, someone who was taking advantage of your family. And you actually wrote the line, knowing what he was capable of gave me a sense of preparedness. I thought about that sentence probably 5 or 6 times since I read it, how really important that was. What did that mean to you?
Well, it just, it taught me, even in the future, forever. Always try to prepare yourself try and see the good stuff, recognize it, but that's very easy to deal with because
Yes.
the good things go by themselves. You don't have to worry
Mm-hmm.
about it. Always try and recognize what somebody is capable of doing, and then you can be prepared. So keep your eyes open. I always keep my eyes open. You meet different people also, like in modeling, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And I have been to auditions that there were people who had different ideas. And, again, my mother always used to say to me, wherever you go, always have a taxi money in your pocket.
Oh, my
Mm-hmm.
mom said the same
Mm-hmm.
thing.
Yep. Yep,
Right.
Oh,
same.
You develop a sense of when to stay close to the door,
Hmm.
hmm
Hmm.
and then always be able to get out.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, I'm not saying it never happened that boys and men don't ever get into a danger, but I think that women need to be always keep that third eye open.
Hmm. Hmm.
agreed.
And you actually talk about that a little more pointedly in the essay about the Playboy Club on page 161, where you talk about you decided that you'd never ever wanted to find yourself on the street with your two suitcases again in order to secure personal freedom from an ex-boyfriend. And then you go on to talk about how you were like, I'm going to be prepared. I'm not going to be caught in this situation again.
Right. Well, that was the one time in my life when I made mistake. I
You're human. We all make mistakes.
Right. I trusted, and I suddenly realized the money wasn't in a bank, and they were supposed to be our money, and suddenly it was all gone. But I thought, okay, I survived worse, so I just packed up and left. But I did decide that it was never going to happen again. And then as I said, I will say that uh, a lot of times people can judge with one stroke everything. And my
Mhm.
experience in Playboy was one of the best. The girls were very close to each other. They helped each other. I was able to, exactly that time, that I was able to find a room Trisha gave me and help, and really helped me to put myself together and put myself back on her feet and to be able to buy my own apartment. So yes, I was never going to be on the street again. And we were protected, if when I was threatened, they drove behind me to make sure I was safe.
Mhm.
Again, don't judge everything the same way.
Exactly. Exactly.
Good
Yeah,
or
that was
bad.
something. Yeah, that was something that I took from the book as well, that don't judge people or a situation from appearances, right? Like everybody has these ideas about what the waitresses at the Playboy Club are going to be like. But you're
Right.
like, no, I found community there. I found a sense of family and belonging there. And these were
Right.
people that some of them that you're still friends
Oh,
with
I'm
many
best
years
friend.
later.
Oh, absolutely. And we keep in touch. All of us keep in touch. It's such a strong community. We have our own Facebook, and we all keep in touch. And if any of the girls or indeed the room directors die, everybody goes to the funeral, and we all talk about it. And it was really an amazing community. The whole idea how it started with Hefner was one thing, but then basically it was a very nice restaurant. And as I write in a book, I was waitress in a normal restaurant, and
Mhm.
but this was really on a high end. It's funny how it got into me, because even now when I go to a restaurant with my husband, and I will say, why did they take the plate away when you haven't finished yet? Like, it's my pet peeve. Like,
Yep,
you
yep.
go and you have like five people, and they take the plates away and the other two are still eating.
Mhm.
Like my pet peeve, I go, excuse me.
Because you did fine dining and
Yep.
Yeah, because but
yep.
it's really, when you think about it, it's kind of a courtesy. I don't even allow it at home, with my children when we were little. Wait till everybody's finished. Have a time for conversation. We are lacking that.
Mhm.
You mentioned a few minutes ago that whenever someone from your friend group passes, you go to each other's funerals. You also talked about funerals in the book and the difference in mourning in the United States versus mourning in Czechoslovakia when you were growing up. And would you touch a little bit on that? Because I think that Americans we don't know how to mourn.
Yeah,
Yeah, we really don't.
yeah. I think that at home, people showed their grief. It
Mhm.
was Nobody was expected to be brave. Everybody, you wore black for 6 months, and then you wore dark for a year. And to me, it shows a little respect for the person who left you.
Mhm.
And it wasn't such a priority to immediately bounce back. I mean, obviously, my mother would bounce back to cooking the meals and doing everything, but she didn't, had a need to wear red and colors. She would wear the black. And, when my mother died, I wore black, even I was living, at the time I was living in England and in Hong Kong. And even it was hot, I wore black because it was for me and
Mm,
for her. And it was the respect I felt. And
Mhm.
I think that down the road, it actually comes back, I think, to haunt us, because people, when they get older, in the quiet times, I don't know, maybe they don't, but I would feel regret that I didn't give that person
Mhm.
the time that they deserved. Especially people who made the marks on me, like your closest family. Obviously, you cannot mourn everybody because, you'll never get out of black. Unfortunately, that's how life is. But the people who truly mean something to you, I think it's important. And I would never go to a funeral without being wearing totally black. To
Mhm.
me, it's a respect.
Mhm.
It's the least I think somebody can do is to make the effort to to put some black clothes on, to show everybody, for those who lost a really dear close one, that you respect their sorrow. But I'm very old-fashioned that way. My husband thinks I'm crazy, but
no,
No.
I do think that is somewhat, it's a ritual for you. And I
Mhm.
think that in the United States, not for everyone, but certainly in my family, we have lost some sense of ritual and where we come from and where our ancestors,
Mhm.
what my ritual would have been with my family if we still did those rituals, and we don't.
Right.
So,
Well, and we're pushing everything down. I
yes.
yes,
mean, we are not encouraged at all to fully express our grief and our
Well,
wounds.
you get 3 days off if it's
Right.
someone close to you, and then you got to get
Yeah.
back to
Isn't
work.
that enough? 3 days, three
Three
whole days,
days
and we don't, and I think as a society, we're very uncomfortable with people
dying.
grieving, well, dying, and then with people grieving outwardly.
yes,
Like Anika, you talk about how at your brother's funeral, you you kept your head down and you were trying not to embarrass your children,
yeah.
with an outpouring of your
I have
grief.
been known to sob.
And I think that's great that you're sobbing. I mean, I actually felt bad that you weren't letting all of that out. And when you wrote about that in the book, I wanted to give you a hug. I wanted to just be like, just go ahead and let it out. It's okay, let it out. And then you talk about how and I'm gonna get the specific sentence wrong, but you talk about how Slovaks may miss the wedding, but they never miss the wake.
That's
They
right.
never miss the opportunity to show their love at someone who has passed.
Right. Right. Yeah, that is very important. That's nobody, I don't think anybody would even think about not going. If, I mean, obviously, if there is a reason they're in hospital or something, it's different.
Mhm.
But you always do that. You just
Mhm.
do. I was very happy and pleased that my children flew from America. And, my son only could go for 48 hours, but he
Mhm.
came, and that meant a lot to me. Even they did not want me to cry,
You
but
have,
they were there beside me,
Mhm. Mhm.
and
They
that
were
was
there to hold space for you.
yeah.
since we're on this subject, I'm going to read my favorite passage of the book. It's on page 67, and this is about your grandmother, Katrina. Katerina? Katerina?
Katarina,
Katerina.
Katarina, yeah.
when she was passing. And when I read this, I think it's the reason it's my favorite passage. It reminded me so much of when my own mother passed, and I cried reading it. So I just want to read it. Suddenly, my grandmother's body stretched violently in my mother's arms as if to get a deep breath. I waited for her to breathe out, but she did not. She fell against my mother's chest, and I knew I had witnessed death. My mother kissed grandmother Katerina's on the forehead and laid her gently in the bed. I pressed my spine into the wall when the door into the room opened, and I saw the silhouette of my grandmother Katerina standing in the doorway. For a brief moment, her face became clear, and she looked directly into my eyes, and I heard her say, "Don't fear stupid people." Then the silhouette dissolved into darkness, and my eyes filled with tears, but I was not afraid. This was my absolute perfect favorite part. I love the way your writing just showed the love from generation to generation, but I also love the way, to me, the "don't fear stupid people" is sort of all about politics and remaining in your own autonomy at the same time. And then also this passage talks about there's something after death, that
Yeah,
she is still with you and will always be with you.
she will be always with me.
It was so beautifully well written. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, since we're talking about that, I will say one positive thing that happened lately, and I was pleased that the flags were lowered
Mm-hmm.
for the appropriate time when Jimmy Carter had died.
Yes.
And I was feared that they will be put up, but they were not. And so I think there's a hope that there's not all lost, that there's still a certain amount of, there's enough people to stop the carnage go all away.
There's so much hope.
Yeah,
There's so much hope.
absolutely.
Well, and speaking of your grandmother and the stories and all of the love and all of this that you share with us, it's because you went back to your love of writing.
Yes.
You had the bravery to say the bravery of that 18-year-old to go, you know what? I'm going to go back to this. I love this and I've put it away for so long. I'm going to go back to it.
Right.
So, can you talk a little bit about how you came back to your love of writing and the bravery of saying, you know what? I'm putting all that behind, all that fear and other people saying that, my writing wasn't good enough or oh, I'm, you know, thinking in one language and writing in another, but you did it. You did it. And now
Yeah.
we get to hold the beauty of you taking that leap.
Well, it was because I must say my husband is very verbal and so are my children. And they would correct my English all the time. But it would be a lot of more struggle if there wasn't a spell check.
For me too.
Yeah. For a lot of us, trust me.
Right. So, and I'm surrounded by dictionaries, and now we can have all of that online. So I can organize my thought, but I love words and I love to also read. And I read a lot of book in English. And so as I read some beautiful passages, I would then formalize similar sentences in my head. And then when children went to school, I said, damn it, I'm going to go to school. And so I went back to school, and then I went to several conferences about writing. I started to write. And so, as I said, the Jackinina and it was several stories before it evolved. Obviously, the last part was added much, 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 much later, because believe it or not, everyone rejected it. It wasn't until the book was almost done. That's why the last bit was added to it. But to me, I never understood, because what really surprised me that the magazines that write for women rejected it. And I was thinking, this is so about women. This is so about the perception and how you get slotted into certain slots and how you have to get out of it. Why cannot a woman's magazine see that? You know? And it was, and I did, I read the biography about Nina Khrushcheva, and I knew a lot about Jackie Kennedy because, for us, the Kennedys were like, so you read all about it. And in a very young age, those two women were really very much affected me. And so when I started, that's what I wanted to write about first. And I personally think it's the best story because best stories for women, because I think it shows that it's who you are. It's how people perceive you doesn't matter. Yeah, that just says it all.
Yeah, that picture says it all. And also though, it's so interesting because it is perception. When I look at both of them, I see beauty in both of them.
Right.
There is one is definitely more of the American standard of the ideal that we see.
Classically beautiful.
Yeah, but they're both beautiful women. They're both beautiful women.
And there's strength in both of them.
Exactly. I mean, if you read about Nina Petrona, what she had to go through, because Ukraine was always a torn country. There were always Russians and there was Ukrainians, and there was always a difficult relationship. And then, of course, during Stalinism, she came through. I mean, you had to have your head, eyes on your back of your head and your ears and everywhere else. And she remained so dignified. I just cannot comprehend why women magazines turned it down.
I can comprehend it, but it's not a pretty story.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, and I just think it's so important that, that we're talking about these women who were, role models and idols for some people. And in one of my favorite essays in the book, The Playgroup, where you talk about how that your generation, you got so much from your previous generation, and now you're giving more to the generation beyond you. And I'd really love to read this passage as well, because I started and underlined it and all, and I just thought it was just so beautiful. So on page 288, you write, as our generation became the baby boomer generation, our playgroup reinvented themselves and became successes. I observed, however, that for all the burned braziers of our youth, we were still very much our mother's daughters, few of whom had the opportunity to have both the career and family. Our little group aimed higher than our mothers, but we accepted the limitations when faced with them. But when the time came, we all reinvented ourselves and we succeeded in the most important goal, to give our daughters every opportunity and support to achieve their ambition, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And every one of our daughters has a wonderful careers, and they all have families and children. It's interesting how for my sons and for the husbands of our daughters, they respect that and they understand it. We were sort of half and half, my generation, but, we are moving forward, and that's positive.
And we will continue to do so.
Absolutely.
Was there anything you wanted to tell our audience that we didn't give you the opportunity to say?
I think you guys did a grand job.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes.
How can someone get your book?
They can get it on Amazon. They can get it on Barnes & Noble website, or they can go to Barnes & Noble shops and they will order it for them. I believe it's on Goodreads and Books A Million, and basically
all the places.
All the outlets will carry the book, yes.
I love it. Thank you so much for writing this book and sharing your family and your stories and all of this with us. Just such beautiful stories. Thank you for letting us be a part of it.
And if I just may for last say, travel is a university of life because it teaches us about other people, other nations, and that's when we find that we are able to understand them.
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
I love it. Thank you so much.
Ladies, I loved it.
Us too.
Thank you so much. Absolutely. Thank you.
So Raquel, want to do a recap?
I love this book so much. And when I said earlier that I feel like I got to know her family through these stories, that is not an over exaggeration. I mean, I came to love these people, even though I've never met them. Anika is keeping them alive, and the love that they had for her and the love that they had for each other alive through these stories. And the theme of belonging, the theme of community, of being kind and paying that forward, all of those themes are so incredibly important. And it's just I love so much the way that Anika writes. There were so many places in here, so many sentences that I underlined and was like, beautifully written, beautiful sentence. Yeah, there was I don't know, the trial of, thinking in one language and writing in another, but it all comes through. It really does. And it's such a heartwarming collection of essays. I'm just very grateful that she wrote it.
Same.
Mhm.
Same. For me, I didn't really put this together until we were talking today, but for me, I think I was feeling a lot of motherly love while I was reading this book. I realized that my daughter, being 18, going off to college right now, she is planning a trip to go to Costa Rica. I always told my kids, my older daughter wanted to go to Paris and she got the opportunity to go without me. And she's like, I don't want to go without you. And I was like, you ever get the opportunity to travel, you go. You go. Your mom will get there one day. You go. The things that shaped my life the most maybe were the traveling that I did when I was young. Being outside of the country, being in Senegal, in Mexico, seeing that other people didn't live the same way that we do, that they don't necessarily have the same freedoms, the same ability to go to school. I met people who lived in practically what I would call a cardboard box with a metal roof, and still lived, still thrived, still had beautiful souls with happiness. And I think that it's important that we learn about the world. Also think like the amount of hope in this book about, things might look really oppressive right now. And I'm not trying to take away from that in any way whatsoever. But I do believe we do have to put our right foot first, our left foot next, our right foot, because there are so many of us who see life this way. We just have to keep focusing on doing the next right thing for one another. What is in our power to do? If it's in my power to help someone, then that's the next right thing for me. If it's in my power to help my daughter to get to Costa Rica so she can learn about other cultures, then that's the next right thing. If it's in my power, maybe someday I can host a child from Costa Rica so that they can see what it's like here.
Right.
Just this book is so hopeful because we have seen dire straits around the world. We continue to see dire straits around the world.
Yeah.
But people survive.
Right.
She slept in a phone booth overnight.
Right.
I think I would be terrified. But yet what she said is, I knew this would pass and
Yep.
the morning would come
Mm-hmm.
and I felt well rested. Like, oh my gosh,
Mm-hmm.
that is
Mm-hmm.
that is how we need to look at every day, really.
Right, right. And to have the wherewithal to then share those stories with other people so that other people can learn from them. Even if we can't travel, we can pick up a book, right? We can pick up a book and we can learn about people who
Yep.
are different from us, people
Yep.
who have
Yep.
different backgrounds and have experienced far different lives than we have. But we see the humanity in each other, right? We see that somebody who grew up behind the Iron Curtain has love for their family and cares about doing kind things for other people and cares about keeping the stories about their loved ones alive and falling in love and having adventures. Underneath it all, are we're people who have feelings and hopes and dreams and ambitions. It's just some of the other stuff might be a little bit different. But this, books and travel, yes, travel, but books allow us to travel even when we can't leave our own city.
Such a valid point, my friend.
Thank you.
Well said.
Thank you. And a well-written book. People, please pick up this book, Encounter with the Future, Anika Pavel. Such a beautiful book. So beautifully written.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like this episode, please share it with a friend.
Or you could leave us a comment and a 5-star review, or email us at madnesscafepodcast@gmail.com.
Thanks, everybody.